Hello and welcome to Connects Live by CX Forums. I'm Mark Michelson and I'd like to introduce today's guests and guest host. We have today KV Dipu, who is in the insurance business, and he runs a large operation and of CX folks. I'll let him explain more. And our guest host, Dennis Wakabayashi, is a longtime good friend here, so we're going to let Dennis and KV take over.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. It's my extreme pleasure to welcome my friend KV to the show today to speak with our audience. The topic today is really around being a great CX leader. I had an opportunity to work with KV at a number of events earlier in the year, and his style of management struck me. It has a very high degree of human empathy, but I also think what's really fascinating about KV is he's been able to take this high degree of human empathy and turn it into extraordinary NPS and customer satisfaction statistics. So with that said, I just welcome you, KV. And if you could just tell the audience a little bit about your role today and what you do, and then we'll dive into some interesting questions where I'm going to try to get personal with you.
Thank you so much for such a warm welcome, Dennis and Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is KV Dipu, as Mark and Dennis introduced me, and my role is President and Head of Operations and Customer Service at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance in India. Bajaj Allianz General Insurance is a joint venture of Bajaj, which is a highly respected and diversified financial services conglomerate in India, and Allianz, which, as most of you would be aware, is the world's #1 insurer. As a joint venture, which is a proud child of two illustrious parents, Bajaj Allianz General Insurance is the world's 8th digitally savvy insurer. So we are ranked number 8 amongst the global top 100 digital insurers. And in my role as the head of operations and customer service, of course, I need to keep the lights on because we have a large customer base. But in addition to that, my key mandate is digital transformation. And prior to joining Bajaj Allianz, I worked with GE Capital for 20 years. So that's a brief introduction to my background for all of you. And I'm looking forward to a very, very engaging discussion with the highly energetic Dennis.
Hi. All right. Well, thank you, KV. What I'd like to do is set the stage because in our show, we have a lot of CX leaders, enthusiasts, practitioners, doers, thought leaders. We all come from diverse backgrounds from different parts of the world. And I try to bring forward the history. What is it that goes into making a great CX leader? Could you tell us a little bit about how you got started? I know that your mother and your father played a large role in how you shaped your view of the world. And tell us a little bit about how it all started with your parents.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. I guess, I'll have to take a trip down memory lane. And you're right. I think, when you're growing up, your parents, do play a significant role, in terms of, their influence on you, in terms of the making of your foundation and your values. My mother was a very strict, disciplinarian, and she had extremely strong people connect. She just connects naturally, with a lot of human beings. So I guess, the discipline, the daily discipline, of ensuring that, you're effective. At the same time, ensuring that, you're connecting, with human beings, based on real empathy, right? And a real concern for, your fellow being. I think these were two values that my mother instilled in me. My father, I think, did an extremely good thing when I was young. He just ensured that when I was growing up, there was a nice bookcase in my room, so I just grew up, watching books, admiring books, and I got into reading from a very young age. And I think, that just expanded my horizons, from an extremely young age, right? I was very well read, for a kid of my age. So I think this combination of, opening up my mind, which my father instilled through the bookcase, and my mother's, granular upbringing, in terms of ensuring that I had empathy for my fellow human beings. At the same time, being disciplined. I think, they played a key role, Dennis, in the making of me as a human being. And coming to your point around, what makes a good CX leader, no matter, what discipline we come from, there are some human values, which are universal. And I think, empathy, is at the center of customer service. It's the foundation of everything that we do. No matter how much we digitize, we realize that there is a born again focus on the core human need for empathy and a healing touch. And I think if people can demonstrate that mindset, they can succeed in CX, no matter what age they are in, no matter, which industry they are in.
Yes. I think I love that you brought up empathy. I think that's a huge topic in almost every CX conversation. One of the other things about customer experience and life lessons as we speak about parents is something I want to share with you that you brought up in our last conversation as we prepared for this show. And I talked to my children about it, and you were right. You basically said that as a parent, surprise and delight are in tremendous experiences when it comes to delivering customer satisfaction or creating a relationship with the customer, but also your children. And I just wanted to tell you that I double checked that little idea with my children. They said, yes, that's exactly it, Dad. We never know what to expect from you. So that's true. Surprise and delight, empathy. I love the conversation about your mother and the framework or the discipline, the foundation. And I think that really speaks to in business, when we deliver customer experience, we both have to deal with the emotional side of things. But if we don't put that in a context and a framework or a practice that delivers progress or success or profits, then we're missing part of the equation there. So you took this foundation of your mother's empathy and her discipline and your father's love for knowledge, and you went on to GE. And that was really the first 3 years where you discovered your penchant for innovation. Can you tell us about, as a business professional, getting in at the beginning, what were the things you looked for? How did you navigate those first years to put yourself in the position of being a president of a global brand delivering high NPS scores?
Right. It's a great question, Dennis, and again, it takes me back to the foundation years of my career at GE. The reason I joined GE was, I read up on Jack Welch, and he was the CEO of GE then, and he was an inspirational leader. And that's why, when I passed out from business school, I opted for GE. And I still remember on day one, when I joined GE, the CEO told us, you need to ask yourself every day, are you driving a job or is your job driving you? And I think, that's a learning, which has stayed with me for life, because when you come in, you do have, tasks, right? There are mails to cater to, and, there are tasks to fulfill. But I think at the end of the day, if you come thinking, how can you drive your job? That's when, you really bring in a transformational mindset. So that's a learning, which has stayed with me for life. The other thing about GE is GE was never, satisfied, and in a very constructive sense, right? I mean, constructive dissatisfaction, I think was in the DNA of GE in terms of, whether it was about selling businesses, buying businesses, or, moving in and out of, the entire landscape. And what I realized is you just need to continuously keep reinventing yourself. And I think, that stayed with me. And if you look at, whatever innovation, we've been able to bring to the table, I think there are two aspects to it, Dennis. I think one is, not having the fear of letting go. You need to, destroy what you have built, in order to ensure that, you are contemporaneous, right, in terms of whatever is changing in the current landscape. And the other is, to ensure that you're never satisfied, right? And I remember reading an article on Tiger Woods. The moment, he wins a golf tournament, right, he's back at the court practicing for the next one. And I think, that again stayed as a learning, right? And it's always about, being up for the challenge.
I want to just pause on that for a minute, because I find this amongst most CX leaders that I think they're reinventing yourself, or the brand part of it, particularly in the thought leadership area of customer experience. I think everyone is always in a quest to reinvent themselves or find the next trend. But at the same time, I can't express how much I agree with you in terms of, I also do this, which is I'm ready to give up everything I've built to get the next to the next level. And I'll give you a point there, which is I just started a new Twitter account. I've been checking my Twitter stats, I'm happy to say I've increased by 300% in followings to up to 3 followers now. So I have one account with 50,000 followers, and I just feel like I've published everything I can possibly say in that channel, and it's time to contribute in a new way. And to truly do that, I've got to be willing to give up all of the past success in that other channel. But that's a scary thing for some people, because it's hard to let go of what you've built. And I think it does separate you as a leader. Many of us on the call today are curious, of course, how you became a global leader, because those are some good ideas. But there's your philosophy. Tell us about the practice of getting yourself in a position to deliver the value that matters, because that's what's helped you ascend to the highest ranks of the industry.
Thanks, Dennis. So the one thing, which GE teaches you, and of course, aided by my mother's own discipline and approach, is to bring in a framework. And to the point that you made, how do you add value? Essentially, I can distill it into a 5-step process. I think the first step, is to listen to your customers. And while it may sound cliched, we've seen, many firms, fall by the wayside, simply because, they haven't, adhere to this very basic principle. And when you're talking about listening to customers, it's not just about acting on customer feedback, but it's also about being proactive. Can you conduct focus group discussions? Can you conduct NPS studies, to also get, proactive feedback beyond, the normal feedback that you get via the multitude of transactions, that any large firm is in. The second step, Dennis, which I think is very critical, which I think a lot of people miss, is to classify customer feedback into not just customers' stated needs, but also customers' unstated needs. Very often, you find latent needs, which even customers themselves do not realize, that they feel, and very often they're not in a position to articulate, their needs, their unstated needs. And I think if as a firm or as a leader, if you can figure out customers' unstated needs and meet them, then you're always, ahead of the industry and ahead of the competition. The third step, Dennis, then, now that, you've understood customer needs and classified them into stated needs and unstated needs, or obvious needs and latent needs, is to then, take an inventory of your current landscape of systems and processes. And typically you will find that while everybody talks about the fact that, the customer is at the center of everything that we do, a lot of the processes and systems would have been set up historically in a siloed manner, keeping the department at the center of everything that we do, right? How often can you go to, let's say, a universal organization and find that, there is one single department, which can cater to all your queries? You are asked to move from one department to another depending on the type of product. So for example, if it's motor insurance, you may go to one department. If it's health insurance, you may go to another department. So the fourth step then, and applying again Lean Six Sigma, which I picked up in GE, because GE was the best training school from a Lean Six Sigma point of view, is to then re-engineer this entire landscape so that you move from a siloed department-centric view of the entire universe to a customer-driven view of the entire universe. So you truly become customer-centric. And then the last step, Dennis, the fifth step, the last and the final step, which is actually the first step for a lot of people, is to then deploy the right digital solution based on, these 4 steps. Now, again, when you launch this, the right digital solution, it's always not about latching onto the latest buzzword in town. Just because people are talking about blockchain or machine learning or artificial intelligence, it does not mean that every solution needs to have, the latest state-of-the-art technology. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. What we need to ensure is, that the solution meets the customer's need and not the other way around. So I think this 5-step process, Dennis, it's pretty much time agnostic, and it has helped us, stay ahead of competitors for many years. And that's what, has helped us drive innovation, get extremely high customer satisfaction scores, and also win a lot of awards globally.
So that's really interesting. I think that's great advice. The other thing I would add there is I talk to a lot of CXOs around the world who they describe a similar framework, but what they also say is if you can't get that framework to deliver a result within 6 months or at least once a year, that you're destined to be replaced by another CX leader who can get the results. Speaking of those results, I've touched on a little bit But I think this audience would be fascinated to hear how you achieved some of the highest customer satisfaction scores in the entire world. And I'd be curious because I happen to know a lot of brands game the system when it comes to NPS. There's a lot of corporate bonuses tied to those NPS scores. So there's a lot of funny business going on, but even your scores transcend any possible gaming of the system. What are your scores and how did you get from the bonus and game system to actual high customer satisfaction?
Thanks, Dennis. One of the simplest ways to avoid anybody trying to game the system is to ensure that whenever you conduct net promoter score studies, you conduct it through a third party agency. They are outside your system, and therefore it's as objective as it gets. I'll just share with you a couple of examples because, as we all know, the art of communication is storytelling. So I'll just share a couple of examples, in terms of how we drove very high customer satisfaction scores. So let me give you, one example, which is in the e-commerce arena. We have a tie-up, with a large e-commerce player in India, and what they do is they sell millions of mobile phones, by the minute, because the moment they launch on the net, all these phones get sold out in a matter of minutes, and they also sell insurance cover along with these mobile phones. And when they did a customer survey, they figured out that a lot of customers, were very wary of a particular type of damage to mobile phones, which is when in case they drop the phone, the screen cracks. So that was a very specific problem. So what we did, we basically understood this. This is real customer feedback which came to us via the partner, and then we basically got into brainstorming sessions. We got into solution orientation sessions, and we came out with a very specific claim program by which, in case the customer bought this phone and he of course took this protection cover from us, then we would ensure that this claim process happened extremely smoothly. And what we also did was, in order to ensure objectivity, we asked the partner to go and conduct an NPS score, because they are our partners, and they will obviously be as objective as they get. And when they got NPS scores from the customers, even we were astounded. Our NPS was 95 on this. So it just shows, right, that if you actually listen to customers, apply agility to your solution, and then conduct your market research in an extremely objective manner, then it can really make a difference to customers. The other example, Dennis, is in the area of health insurance. And if you look at insurance, especially PNC insurance, property and casualty insurance, where often you're insuring inanimate objects, health insurance is one area where you insure the human being. And what we figured out, when we spoke to our customers, a lot of customers, when they're getting hospitalized, they came, they kind of told us, and this was about unstated needs. They were not very articulate, but we kind of, read between the lines, that when they were in hospitals, they wanted their sole focus to be on recovery, right? The person is not feeling well. He doesn't have the bandwidth to deal with, the complex administrative machinery in hospitals. Go to one department, for a test, go to another department, to pick up the report, go to a third department for billing, so on and so forth. So what we did, we came out of the pilot, we picked up select hospitals where, there was a high footfall of customers, who would go in for hospitalization. And we deployed a virtual relationship manager, virtual because the relationship manager couldn't visit the hospital physically during COVID times. And he basically had a digital device. So what he did was he called up these customers and he gave them a lot of empathy. He told them, saying that, I understand you're going for hospitalization. I'm here to take care of, all your paperwork.
Wow.
Please do not worry about anything other than, recovery, which is just your movement in very simple terms from illness to wellness. And using a digital device, he took care of all the processing, digitally. And customers, because they had not seen anything like this, when they actually recovered and we asked them for feedback, they were, for want of a better word, taken aback, in a positive sense. And they gave us such positive feedback. And, we said, let's do an NPS on this. And we got a score of 90 without a single detractor. And this, is now recognized by Allianz, as a global best practice. And, Allianz now wants to take it to virtually all countries around the world.
Congratulations there. I know that this has been invigorating for me as always, but I know our audience is anxious to ask you a few questions. And, and then after we ask some questions, we'll get some breakout rooms where people can interact with you one-on-one, which I think will be exciting for all. I have one personal question for you. I always like to throw a curveball at the guest just so we can really get to know them. You spoke about your father and these books. So you have a love for books. I'm curious, what is the last book that you gave to someone as a gift and why?
Well, that really gets me thinking, Dennis, because, I read, so many books. But I think, the last book that I gifted somebody was this book, which you may have heard of. It's called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. I think it's a fantastic book, on what most people would call networking, but I guess, what he calls connecting, in terms of ensuring that you build, strong human connections. And I think in today's times, when a lot of interactions with people are virtual, I think, it's a really good book to read and, remind yourself, of core human needs, in terms of connecting with human beings. And therefore, if I were to gift, book to someone, it would be this. In fact, I just gave it to somebody, a few days back.
Awesome. I'm going to go get that book now. Thank you, KV. I want to turn this over to get some people in to ask. There's a lot of questions coming in on the chat. The first guy, the first question came in from Scott. Scott, can you turn on your camera and just ask KV your question? And after that, we'll turn it over to Susan Walker next. Scott, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Dennis. Hi there. Hi, KV. Nice to meet you and hear from you. Thank you very much. You were talking about talking with customers as the most important aspect of customer experience, and I think everybody on the call here would agree. But my question is, in the context of a new assignment, say, either a new job or you take on a new account or a consulting gig, yes, talking with customers is the most important, but what is the first thing you would do?
Okay. Firstly, good afternoon, Scott. And I think, it's an extremely, interesting question. There are two aspects to it, Scott. When you're driving CX, of course, you need to speak to customers because you get raw, unbiased views, right? It's not filtered by anybody in the organization. And therefore, I think it's an extremely good way of, getting to know, what's really happening out there. So that's why, it's important in any CX role. And to your point around what's the first thing to do, when you take on a new role, obviously, on the first day, you don't go talking to customers. I think the first thing to do, when you take on a new role, is to basically, get your hands on the landscape, right? You just need to figure out, what are the expectations from you as a leader. Also, for example, figure out the informal org chart, right? Because there's always a formal org chart. But informally, you figure out, who are the decision makers, who are the key influencers, because that's how, you navigate your way around the organization. So I would think it's about meeting people, getting expectations, figuring out, who are the key stakeholders, who will be with you on your journey, including the ones who are likely to oppose you, of course, and of course, the ones, who will be with you. And then once you have your, your observations laid out, then of course, going around and, meeting your most important customers, could be internal customers, could be external customers, so that you get a, a complete view. And then based on that, you can take a very informed view in terms of, coming out with your 100-day blueprint, or whatever it is that the firm expects from you. So I would think, that these 2-3 steps, at least, these have helped me whenever I've taken on new roles.
Sure, thank you, KV. Dennis, can I throw in a little? You mentioned CX bloopers. A quick blooper that my team, or was under my watch, merger between two large European-based companies. Okay, go see your accounts. And one of our top salespersons went to an account and said, "Okay, I'm here to learn about you. Can you tell me something about you?" Guess what the customer said? "I am your largest account." So we hadn't taken the time to equip our salespeople to learn something first before going out. So thank you.
Thanks.
So that's just, yeah. So, sorry, Dennis. I just want to tell Scott that's an absolutely valid point. You just can't go to the market, without even having a basic understanding, of the firm's landscape. So I completely agree with you. Yeah. Sorry, Dennis. Yeah, back to you.
Great point, everyone. Susan, I think you bring up a very nuanced question. Yes, we're all about reinventing ourselves and tossing away the old, but I think you're right. Let's put some meat with those potatoes. Go ahead and let's ask your question.
Okay. Good afternoon, KV. This is very informative. Thank you. So I've been in the CX world for a long time, and many of us never ever get the chance to start from scratch. We inherit existing processes, existing staff, existing customers. We always have a guideline or a goal that we have to meet, but in dealing with some of the short and new and sort of new ongoing issues, especially through COVID, how would you attack or address some ways to help restart an entity that needs a bit of a lift, maybe hasn't succeeded real well in COVID, meeting their SAT scores or even addressing the needs of the customers, just basically surviving day to day? What would you suggest the leader do? What recommendations can you give on how to address or look at specific areas of focus to help turn that situation around?
Good afternoon, Susan, and thank you for your compliments. You are absolutely right in terms of your question. I think that's the situation most of us are in. I think very few of us have the luxury of, starting with, starting from scratch, right? Because you're always, in a firm which has had some customers, and there are always, legacy issues and systems to deal with. So, Susan, this is what I recommend, and this is what I did. For example, when I joined Allianz from GE, because it is an existing organization, I basically came out with a three-track program. One is called Run. Run is essentially around the fact that it's an existing firm with a large customer base, and therefore, how do you tackle those issues? Because there is no running away from the fact that you need to keep the lights on. So therefore, how do you do that? And that's where the focus on customer centricity, efficiency, getting the best out of your people, so on and so forth, right? All that we do as CX leaders day in and day out come to the fore. The second aspect, Susan, is or the second track that I ran was called Transform, because we're also in a situation as leaders where we need to transact and transform simultaneously. We don't have the luxury of picking one over the other. And here, basically, what I did was based on customer feedback. I basically prioritized, the top three areas. It's very important to keep prioritizing, because you will have, 2, 3 areas at any point in time. And then, I basically leveraged Lean Six Sigma to basically, get special teams. The best way to deal with large issues is to ensure that you have cross-functional teams. McKinsey calls them squads. SQA is the standard squad term. But essentially, in G, that's something which has worked for us. Bring in people from across the landscape, and then have, cross-functional teams deal with them. And the third track, Susan, what I ran was what I called Innovate. So here, what you do is, you look at what is not, present, in your kitty today. You basically, scout the entire landscape, look at what startups are doing, look at what people across different industries are doing. And then, you bring in those, initiatives, into your firm. So by keeping a very tight watch on Run, Transform, and Innovate, not only was I able to fix the issues of today, but I was also able to prepare for tomorrow. And I think that's something which I've seen works across firms.
Thank you. That's good info. Thank you.
Awesome.
Welcome, Susan. Thank you.
Well, all right. With that, I think we're just about ready to get into our breakout rooms for a little one-on-one with KV. But before we go, Mark, if you'd like to turn off your camera and
Sure.
ask your questions.
Well, super session. I really appreciate all the insights there, KV. And we did have one more comment here from Michael Cooper. I just want to make sure we include him on this. Michael, did you want to ask your question?
Sure, thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. KV, thank you. Nice to meet you, and interesting chat. Thank you for your time. It's a bit of a cheat question because I have to be honest, I'm actually working with a European health insurer. And my point is, and the point I'm making with them, and the question I want to ask you, insurance is a difficult sale. Nobody really wants insurance. It's a kind of buyer's remorse thing. You know you need it, but you hope you never want to use it. So how do you engage with your customers post-purchase to keep them engaged and stop buyer's remorse and maybe some churn?
Good afternoon, Michael, and thanks for your kind words. And your question is bang on. Having been in insurance, for quite a few years now, I completely agree with you. Insurance is what we call, a conversational sale. And, the best way to deal with it is to ensure that you have cross-functional teams. Insurance is
Yeah.
Michael, the reason this happens is because as human beings, we are not, wired to think of, the rainy days, right? Nobody wakes up thinking, that I'm going to crash my car or, I'm going to go to the hospital. So insurance is something which comes to your aid, during your tough times, right? So which is why when you wake up, you'll think, let me have a great day, let at work, or let me spend some time with my family. So what we have seen, it's extremely important to have conversations with customers. And when you have conversations with customers, what you basically tell them is, yes, while we all look forward to a good day, but the fact of life is, that we do come across, situations wherein we need help. And that's how, the insurance sale happens. And to your point around, whether it's cognitive or emotional, I think it's a combination of the two. It's cognitive because, it's a conversational sale, and it's emotional because if somebody has gone through a tough time, he's basically seen somebody in the family, pass away, right? And then they want to basically buy health insurance cover for others, then it tends to get, a little emotional. And to your point around, how do you prevent, post purchase dissonance, right? Because you spoke about buyer's remorse. The one thing, Michael, which I think it's extremely simple at one level, Michael, but I think a lot of people get it wrong, is it's always about full transparency and complete disclosure to customers.
Mm.
There is no scope for missell. There is no scope for, hiding any information and sharing information, only on a need-only basis. I think if we are absolutely transparent about, the value of the product, what are the drawbacks,
Mm.
even in terms of, explaining, the legal language to customers, because
Yeah.
a lot of literature, is not customer friendly, right? Especially when you
Yeah.
look at institutions
Yeah.
and health insurance, right? I think
Yeah.
if it's very clearly explained to customers, then I've seen that, the buyer's remorse can be minimized.
Can
And
I?
that is something we are focused on, Michael, because what we realize is that insurance is not a one-off sale. It's a lifelong process, and you
Yes.
want these customers to come back to you because you know the value of renewals, right? So there is no point in killing the goose which lays the golden eggs, right? It's better to be absolutely transparent. For example, even to the extent of going in for opt-in rather than opt-out, right? So you have to be that clear. It should be explicit consent. It can't be implicit consent. Then I think you are in the game.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Just as an add-on, not a question. I know the time's running out. The company I'm working for have got a 104-page contract. Who reads it?
Absolutely, Michael. In fact, when I was in GE, there was a challenge given, and Korea, they had 1,000-page agreement. They reduced it to one page. One
Yes.
page. Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah. So that's something, which is very important. You need to make the literature customer friendly. There is no point in making it lawyer friendly.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
Thanks,
Michael,
Mike.
thank you for your questions. KV, thank you. Mark and Audrey, if you'd like to take us to the break rooms.
Okay, yes, we're about ready to go to the breakout. And before I do that, I do want to share with everyone that we are live with our Boston event. Here is the Boston website. And everyone gave some great input. If you haven't seen our updated website, this is what it looks like now compared to last time. And we are going to be announcing our speakers next week. So, if you do happen to be in Boston and you would like to be a speaker and you haven't submitted a proposal yet, please do so as soon as possible. You can see it's supposed to be today. But we're very excited about our agenda and our program. And the super early bird tickets are on sale today, and they end on August 1st and going to regular early bird. So if you're interested, it's cxforums.org/BOS21. And that's it for today's session of Connects Live. Tune in next week where we're going to have Jonathan Hawkins, who is with a group that deals with neurology and heuristic thinking. It's going to be a fascinating study and discussion all about how we plan for behavioral changes using predictive behavioral analytics. So join us next week, and thank you very much to Dennis and KV for today's discussion. And Audrey, take us out.